So in a previous video, we repaired a Game Gear using nothing more than used capacitors off of some scrap boards that I've had laying around. So the repair cost me nothing, and we were able to get that Game Gear up and running just fine. For this Game Gear, if the problem is the same and it needs new capacitors, which the chances are pretty high, I've actually gone ahead and ordered a Game Gear capacitor replacement kit from eBay. And all this is somebody has gone ahead and collected the new capacitors that are needed for this model. This is the VA1 model, and it's only a few dollars, and it's much cheaper than ordering the capacitors in bulk or even individually, if you can even do that, from many of the online component retailers, or the much cheaper than the online component resellers such as DigiKey or Mauser or any of those. Now, not to say that those places aren't great, but they're better if you're buying in bulk. If you only need a couple of one type of capacitor, it's better just to go on eBay and buy one of these kits if you're not going to be doing this a lot. However, if you could also just find some old electronics that are not being used and pull the parts out of those as well, like I did before. However, we're going to see how this works. So, but let me show you what this one does before we go any further. We'll see if the capacitors are the issue with this model. As you can see, it does a whole lot of nothing. Get the light glare out of there. We have no sound. Now, one thing I will say is the LCD on this is, if you can even see that in the camera, there's some light spots on the LCD there. So the LCD is not in the best of shape, but it should at least be able to show an image. So let's go ahead and get this apart. So first thing I'm going to do is replace all the capacitors on the main board here. There's one. Now, as I explained in the last video, when you're dealing with capacitors, especially electrolytic capacitors, the only thing you really want to be concerned with is how many farads it is, how many microfarads, at least in this case. And so if it's going to have two ratings, it's going to have, so on this it says 10 microfarads or 10 6.3 V. So that's 10 microfarads, 6.3 volts. As long as the microfarads match and you have you meet the minimum voltage, you're fine. So if it's 10 microfarads at 10 volts that you're putting in, it's fine. 10 microfarads at 100 volts, you're fine. 10 microfarads at 2 volts, you're not fine. It's got to at least meet the minimum voltage requirement. And it has to meet the microfarads exactly. And the other issue that you're going to run into is if you have a higher voltage, it's going to be a larger capacitor, so you also have to make sure it fits as well. So it looks like what I've been supplied with here is 10 microfarads at 16 volts. As if you notice on here, there's a negative and a positive. Sometimes it's only going to show the negative. That's generally what you're going to see, the fact that it's showing positive as it was. On the capacitor itself, you're just going to see a little white stripe. You're not going to see anything for the positive. You want to make sure that you match the negative with the negative. Now when you're putting these in, I'll show you on the next one. One thing that does help is if you bend the leads, so that way it can lay flush with the board. So let's do another 10. Let's see, where's the next 10 microfarad at? do is move these leads in a little bit. And I'm going to grab it. Move it down here so it focuses and bring it over the chip. I'm just going to bend it down. Oops, of course I just screwed up. So I don't know if you can see that. But I kind of just bent it down a little bit so that the leads lay flush with the board. Okay, so we got the 10 microfarad ones done. And I am embarrassed to say that I'm the one that did those solder joints. So let's get that 33 out of the way. If you remember from the last video, I said that was a weird, rating. Here it is. Here's a better way to look at it. Okay, now this is actually good. This is a good example to show you. This capacitor was leaking. And let's see if I can show you in the bottom here. And for all we know, this could have been the whole problem, but we're going to replace all the caps anyway. I'm not sure if you can see that on camera. I'm just going to get it under the light. See all that discoloration under there? Right here in the front of it, that under the light there, you can see all that yellow crap. That's probably just glue that they used to hold it down when they were wave soldering it, but it has actually eaten away part of the trace, so that's why I'm having trouble actually soldering to it now. When I had the soldering iron on there, I can feel there's not much trace left. Because the electrolytic fluid, which is very similar to battery acid that you would get out of a car, it just eats away anything in its path. So what you do, I mean, I have a contact cleaner, which essentially is just a brush with isopropyl alcohol inside of it. If you don't have one of these, it's great to have. You can use this for everything. Go get yourself a bottle of isopropyl alcohol, 91%, but if you only have 78%, that's fine. 91%, it's basically isopropyl alcohol mixed with distilled water. 91% means 91% isopropyl alcohol, 9% distilled water. So you get more, it's much more pure. This will deactivate it. Now, if the pad is completely chewed away, notice you have all this here. This is what it's connected to, and all this down here. So what you can actually do is scrape away some of the top and solder the capacitor to that to the, I'll show you. You start to scrape it away, you start to actually see the copper underneath. So you can solder to that. It's very important that you actually deactivate the electrolytes, the electrolyte fluid, and stop it from eating the rest of the board. And I didn't really see too much of that on the other capacitors, otherwise I would have stopped. Is that right where I was at? But we might see more of that. But use isopropyl alcohol with a Q-tip, clean it off, and you're back in business. Now what I'm going to do first is take my meter, and we're just going to test for continuity. So what I'm doing is you see these two little points here. Probe that as well as the remaining parts of the pad. And there is still some parts of the pad left. So let's do the same over here. And I don't see any, so here's what we're going to do. I'm just going to go like this. I'm going to dig in. And that pad is still good. Some of it's eaten away, but there's still some to solder to. Just to make sure it's making contact. Test it again. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to test the leg, or the lead. That's working. We're going to test this side. So it's good. All right, next. This one doesn't look too good either. It's 100 milli. What is that? 100 microfarad at 4 volts. So that one is going to be an absolute bear to get off. So let's try to get that out of the way. Okay, so let's do, this is going to be 68 microfarad, 6.3. This one looks pretty nasty. All right, it's a 22 microfarad there. Okay, this is a 4.7. 35 volts. Okay, so next we have these two here. Now they read R47. Now the R essentially stands for decimal place. It means 0.47. So we have two, there's R47 50 volts and here's 0.47 50 volts. So you can always flip it over here if you need it. Another one. Negative to the left. Okay, perfect. Well, not perfect, but good enough. Alright, so should we turn it on and just see if it does anything? I mean, we still have all these caps to replace, although they don't look too bad. And I believe there actually is a cap on the other side of the board. But, yeah. Let's turn it on, let's see what happens. Sound. It works. You can't see it. Yeah, this LCD is pretty much shot. Remember, it went from doing absolutely nothing to actually playing now. So why do we have no sound? Alright, so through headphones, I get one channel, I get the right channel. So, hey, it turns on and it plays. So let's see what the problem is. I'm wondering, could be the soundboard. There is capacitors in the soundboard that could be bad. So let's take this apart. Okay, so after fast forward a few hours, it turns out it was not the capacitors on this board. I've tried a couple. I've actually dodged a few things up. It turns out this chip is actually bad. It looks like something shorted out on this board and popped the chip. I wound up hooking another chip up, or actually hooking this chip up in a circuit, and one side of it does not work. However, I do have another Game Gear that is in pretty bad shape that I'm not even going to bother fixing it, but we're going to use it for parts. And I pulled the soundboard out of that, and although this one is from a newer model, the connector is not the same, and the chip is not the same. However, the pinout is, and if you modify it or you cut the connector up so that it'll fit, you get no sound. Why did I just get no sound? Let's try it again. It's just working. But if you force the connector in and turn it on, you do get sound again. You short this board out. So anyway, I'm just going to wind up using this. I'm also going to try and swap out the speaker because it sounds like this speaker is shot. I don't know what happened. Somebody left it out in the rain or poured something onto it. So I'm going to use that board, and I'm going to swap off this connector just to make it nice and clean, and switch the connectors over. I mean, I guess I could just, well, see, I don't know what the limits are or what the specs are on this other chip. I really don't feel like redesigning this whole thing. I could look it up and see if I could just, because everything else on this board looks identical. Like literally, I could just swap the chip over, but it'd be easier just to switch the connector, I think. So here's what I did. I just cut the connector with a knife so that the other side can fit in. Doesn't snap in like it did before, but it's still pretty tight. So I'm not really too worried about it falling apart while it's actually put back together. So let's do that together. Let's do that now. Let's put it back together. The other thing is I'm going to swap this speaker. So rather than pulling the speaker out of the, since these are plastic rivets, I'm just going to swap off the whole top piece. They're about the same anyway. So I might be doing a mod soon on one of these to put maybe like a lithium battery pack in and a charging circuit. I am really using, what is it, 6 AA batteries just to get 2 hours of use out of it. Alright. Yeah, watch it not work now. Zoom in. So it seems to work pretty good. So if you have any questions or comments, leave them down below.